welcome back to another episode of Inspired Content. This episode is another storytelling game. This one's called Nanofictionary, and it's the card game of telling tiny stories. We'll take a look at that and see what ideas it inspires, and I'll see you on the other side. Alright, so this is Nanofictionary, and the deck comes in, I guess, 5 pieces, though I still am struggling to figure out what the point of the number cards are. There's a thing on the instructions that state that there's a feature for somebody draws a number card, then everybody else draws more cards. But since the deck is separated into 4 decks, you'd have to shuffle them in randomly somewhere? I don't understand that part. But, yeah, this is the instruction card, and it gives very basic descriptions that basically it says, in the first phase, every builds a collection of story elements featuring at least one of each type. At least one of each. It doesn't really explain how to play the game. It says to go to this website on the bottom. Problem is, if you enter that web address, it goes to a 404 not found. So you have to type in Nanofictionary into Google, and it'll take you over to the location of the actual site. And once you get there, you have to click on a link that says instructions and then read through them, because this won't tell you how to play the game. But that didn't prevent me from using the cards for goofing around earlier, which was kind of fun. But the basic premise, at least according to the directions that I've been able to understand, is every player draws 2 cards that are characters. Draws 1 card that is setting, 1 card that is problem, 1 card that is resolution. Everybody goes around and does that, and for each round you start with your starting player, and they get to draw a card and discard a card. And I guess they can draw from any deck, and they're trying to build a story out of the cards they draw. And once you think you can finish a story, which, I mean, this is one of the first rounds here, so I can say an inner city schoolgirl, the troubled loner that no one really pays much attention to, are at a convention where a escaped zoo animal has gotten in. Or maybe it's a stage performer who had a monkey or a caged lion and it's escaped and it's running around the convention. And they have to resolve that problem. So you tell the story about how they do that. And then you finish up with they go their separate ways and they never see each other again. It's like I could pretty much build a story by just filling in this gap with whatever I want to fabricate on my own. So I don't even have to draw or discard any cards. But if you want to do a round of hands, everybody gets a shot at that, and then once you go around, everybody needs to build a complete story, and then the last person with an incomplete story gets one more round of trying to discard and draw to resolve their story needs. But that's at the end of that, all the players vote on which was the best story. That's the way they want to play the game. And the rules also say that you can discard any card in your hand that you want, as long as you keep at least one of each category. So it's possible you can get rid of one of the character cards, I guess, in one of your discards. Now that's it, I guess. Nanofictionary. Where to start? Well, I guess I'm just gonna hit it with the straight out 3.1 out of 7.5. I purchased this game with the idea that it would be maybe a fun way to tell short, simple stories. Maybe get some of my family members who aren't usually storytellers to tell stories. But the fact that the game doesn't really come with a full set of instructions might actually be its biggest bonus, because it allows you to come up with your own ways to use the cards. Unfortunately, the secondary part of this process is a lot of the cards are story elements that are nigh on useless unless you're playing a game with people under the age of 10. So, I mean, I guess maybe there's some use for it if you're into a certain type of joke telling or stuff like that, but it does lead me to think about the potential this game could have had, and so that's where we're going to go into some of the inspirations. I can see something like this being useful, at least something similar to this design, being useful for maybe a fun game and maybe for story pitch ideas, where you can do, you've seen some of the previews of a movie coming out where they go, in a world where something, 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 something. It's usually in a world, so you get the setting, a character has to face the situation and then imply the goal at the end. And that's really what these cards are, was character cards, setting cards, situation, and ending they intend to achieve. And I mean, so it would be really great for doing those little in a world kind of blurbs. The idea of taking some of the individual decks, the 4 decks they have in here, and setting them out separately as just a whole deck of cards about characters, and the goal being each person draws 2 cards, and you try to get your character, that one card, to lead to the next card. So you might draw 2 character cards that talk about starting a character who is a surgeon, and the next card you draw is a character who is a serial arsonist. And you have to tell a story that turns your surgeon into the serial arsonist. That would be an interesting game to play. Whereas everybody gets 2 cards and they draw out their character and they have to tell a story based off of, you know, changing their character from how they start to how they finish. At the same way, you could do something for a deck of setting cards. You take one setting, and it's either getting from that setting to the second setting card you draw, or the story of how the world goes from being the first one to the second one. Maybe you start in a lush jungle and the second card you draw is a expanse of endless ocean. How does the world go from the lush jungle to the ocean? Or maybe it's a grassy plain to a desert. How does that happen? And you tell the story of the people who are living at that time, seeing that happen to the world. Maybe the story is somebody's going from being a cowboy to settling Mars. You know, tell that story. I think this could be kind of fun as a means of telling jokes instead of stories, where you draw the elements of a joke and you try to come up with a joke or a limerick or a rhyme or something like that maybe even just a haiku or a poem. These might be useful for making prompts for visual art, like paintings or sculpture, because they have enough of a strange factor to them that you're going to get some very abstract and surrealistic art from the chunks that you have to stitch together. So you could pull a character card and a situation card, or one of each of the 4 sets, and combine them together and form an image in your mind of the work you want to produce from those. I can see something like this, but maybe not exactly this, being used to do an RPG game, where each person draws a character card and they have to take the role of that character. And they take an ending card, and that supplies the sort of motivation for their character. And then the game itself consists of drawing setting and problems and laying them out. You know, if you're on an adventure with your crew and you're in a certain setting and you decide as a group you're leaving that setting, you go further travel, you draw a new setting, and then as you're going along you'll pull out a situation card. So something happens and then you have to figure out how your characters react to that. I can see that being something to do with this. I think you're going to have a little trouble with things like this set of cards, where you have the spaceship captain in disguise, or the long-haired hippie, or the snake with a good personality. That would be a little hard to do an RPG with that. But with a different set of character cards and maybe some of the settings changed and the situations, yeah, I can see that working. I can see using this as an adventure narration device, where a group of people get around to cooperatively tell a narrative. You draw a character card, or maybe 2, maybe a sidekick or something like that, and the character or characters are set to the side, and everybody collectively tells the story of these people. And then you shuffle all the other cards together, and each person takes a turn turning over cards that are people, places, or situations, and tells a story. And the setting might shift, and so you have to figure out how to get from where you are in the current situation to the new setting, and why you're going there for the story element of this character's adventure. And when you finally hit an ending card, that's where you have to end the story. And once you've hit the ending card, everybody tallies up the cards that they've used and laid in front of themselves, and the person with the most cards wins. So, those are some ways I think this game could have been made better, or ideas we could take some of the basics of a deck divided into setting, characters, situations, and endings, and turn it into something different. But as it stands, I mean, I could still use these for some things, especially art prompts and maybe children's stories, but that's about as much as I can do with this. Alright, see you for the next episode.